Well, hello again. It's Jim Parsons, your writing mentor, with lesson 10 of Write That Novel Now. Today we're going to be talking about third-person narration. But before I do that, I promised a long time ago that I would be, from time to time, showcasing the work of some of my writing mentoring clients. And today I'm going to showcase a book by Glenn Bowden, called Liverpool. It's a bit hard to read it. Liverpool for Real. As you would be aware, my principal area of expertise, the thing I love doing, is mentoring people for novels. That's why you're watching a novel writing course. But so many people come to me also with non-fiction books, and I am delighted to help. Notice this halo? Now you'll never be able to unsee that. St. James, the novel hermit. That's me. Okay, Glenn is a Kiwi. He's from New Zealand. Kiwi's what we Aussies call New Zealanders. And he has this absolute passion for football, which I don't share. So this was quite an interesting book for me. He has a passion for football, and in particular, the Liverpool Football Club. He's a fan of Liverpool, even though he lives so many miles away. And he was determined he had to see his club play on their home ground. And so he goes to Liverpool, and it's a delightful book. He's a very funny writer, but it's quite moving too. I actually did the back blurb for him as a favour. Now, don't think that just because you get me to mentor you through your novel that I'm going to write the back cover blurb for you. I'm not. You write it, I'll check it over and give you some help. Okay, here's what I've got. I started the back cover with a quote from the book to give readers an idea of the style of his writing. And this is what he said. When you lift your scarf with both hands above your head and sing, "You'll Never Walk Alone" at Anfield, your heart inflates 10 times its normal size. A well of emotions bores through your centre, and life suddenly seems infinitely more precious than it did just seconds before. At the end of the storm, the golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. It was around the lark bit where I had to take stock. Pausing mid-song not only made me realise just how superior the voices around me were to my own. It also prevented me from breaking down and bawling my crybaby eyes out. Yep, when it comes to Liverpool, I'm a soppy, sentimental fool. Well, that's Glenn's writing, and this is what I had to say about it. Glenn Bowden, Kiwi by birth and Scouse by desire, makes a pilgrimage to Liverpool to see his team victorious on their home ground of Anfield. For years, he has admired the Liverpool way, the code of conduct that instills a sense of community, continuity and soul. Finally, he had to experience it. If football has an evangelist, it is the passionate Bowden. Disbelievers will be swayed by his fervour, disarmed by his humour, and will come to love Liverpool city and team. Just another book about football? Don't be fooled. Bowden's affection and acerbic humour is turned on the city of Liverpool, its inhabitants, and the unlucky people in his life. It is as much a rich travelogue and witty autobiography as a celebration of football and the Liverpool Football Club. By the end of the book, you'll yearn to see Liverpool and sing with 40,000 Scousers, "You'll Never Walk Alone." And I have to say, this book inspired me to go to Liverpool when we were in Britain. I didn't go to the football. I liked Liverpool. Okay, let's get back to work. We're talking about third person. The obvious relationship is with first person. And if you recall, I said that first person was a great narrative voice to use because it was so natural. We talk about ourselves. I did this. I think this. This is what's going on. So we use first person when we tell a story to our friends. Therefore, it's very natural when we see it written down someone else is talking to us. But third person is equally natural. Think about when a friend of yours tells you a story about someone else, right? Your friend Jan might say, "Oh, did I tell you what happened to Mum last week?" And because you're a good listener, you'll say, "No, what happened? Tell me all." And Jan will say, "Well, Mum went down to the bank. You know, she always goes on a Thursday because of her arthritis. It worry her as much on Thursday. And that's the day a pension comes in. Well, because Jan always goes off on a pension. So Mum went into the bank, and as she was waiting in line, this fellow came in wearing a full face helmet. Okay, what's happening here? Jan is talking to us, but she's talking about her mum. She's talking about a third person, not herself. She's talking about a third person, her mum. So the name itself makes sense, doesn't it? And it's also quite natural if we hear what the mother is thinking, because the presumption is that Mum has told Jan and Jan is passing it on to us. So, for example, she might say, "And Mum saw this fellow wearing a full face helmet. And she thought, well, that's funny. You're not supposed to wear helmets. It says on the wall over there that no full face helmets are to be worn inside the bank." So that's Mum's thoughts we're hearing there that have been passed on by Jan. And it's quite natural, isn't it? And so Jan continues, so Mum went over to this fellow doing a public service and said to him, "Excuse me, did you read the sign? You're not supposed to wear a full face helmet." Mum didn't realise she was talking to a real bank robber. Okay, stories develop. So that's all very natural. Now I'm going to slide into third person omniscient. See if you can pick it up, and I'll bet it doesn't seem quite so natural. So Mum goes over to this fellow and says, "Excuse me," because she thought no one should be wearing a helmet. This is what Mum thought, and no one should be wearing a helmet inside the bank. She goes over to this fellow and she says, "Excuse me, did you read the sign there? You're not supposed to be wearing a helmet." Mum didn't realise she was talking to a real bank robber. And the robber was thinking, a strange old lady. Doesn't she realise I'm here to rob a bank? So he whipped out his pistol and held it at Mum. And he was thinking, if this doesn't convince her, blah, blah. So can you see, all of a sudden, not only do we know what Mum is thinking, we now know what the robber is thinking. That is not normal. Jan, when she tells the story, cannot possibly know what the robber was thinking. So Jan has taken on a certain omniscience. She's sitting above the scene like God, knowing what's everybody. And then she might say, and the bank teller knew what was going on. The bank teller thought, well, this stupid old lady is going to get herself blown away. Right? Then we get some more omniscience, because suddenly Jan knows what Mum thinks, what the bank robber thinks, and what the bank teller thinks. That's omniscient narration. And you will find it in many books. It's quite a legitimate form, but it's not quite so natural. Third person limited is very natural. That's what we started with, where Jan is telling us what her mum thinks, because it's okay, we can get inside one character's head. And so that's third person. That is third person. Have you got an idea of that? Third person can be omniscient, where you tell what everybody thinks, and limited is where you show what one person thinks. The other one, of course, is third person multiple voice. And I'll be looking at these two in more detail in later lessons, but just to give you a tip off, the third person multiple voice is where you do get into the heads of two or more characters, but you give them their own space. You don't leap from head to head like a performing flea. You give them some space. You might give them an entire chapter, and you signal to your reader that you're going to shift to another person's perspective, another point of view, POV. So that's where you have multiple voices, and that works very well. So that's multiple voice. Let's look at some third-person narration. And I want to start off with something pretty awful. This is just a passage to demonstrate what it means by telling instead of showing. That old saw, show, don't tell. Well, what's telling? Well, this, my friends, is telling. But it's third-person narration. I'm going to read it through so that I know you've got to the end of the passage. I'm not just sitting there waiting. So here we go. John, who lived in Brisbane, had not long arrived home from work when he got a phone call from his father, a university lecturer in Melbourne. John's father sounded uncharacteristically rattled and asked a huge favour. He could not or would not reveal why. He wanted John to fly to Melbourne on the next available flight, bringing with him a briefcase that would be delivered in the hour. His father demanded that he ask no questions and on no account open the briefcase. He was not to let it out of his sight. John was mystified. Because he loved and trusted his father, John agreed to do this. After hanging up, he started to wonder what it was all about. He couldn't imagine his father doing anything illegal or being involved in, say, the drug trade. He considered the possibility that his father was being blackmailed. As John packed a small overnight bag, he puzzled over the dilemma his father had placed him in. A half hour later, there was a knock at the door. A burly man in an overcoat and felt hat pulled low, reminiscent of a 40s spy movie character, asked if he was John Slater. When he confirmed this, the briefcase was thrust into his hands and the man turned on his heels. John was alarmed. He called after him, asking what was going on, and got a gruff, "I'm just a delivery man," response. He checked online and booked a flight, allowing enough time to get to the airport. He took a cab. In the cab, John wondered whether he would get through security with that bag. Had his father taken into account the possibility John might be asked to open the case? At the airport, John was naturally nervous and was concerned that this would show and tip off the security people to search him. There's the third person passage. As I said, pretty awful because I have worked very hard to make it so. When you think about it, treated well, it has possibilities. Very unusual situation for someone to be placed in. All cloak and dagger stuff. And so I'm sure you could make a good story out of that. Anyone want it? You're welcome to it. Okay. So why is it telling? Well, for a start, we never get inside John's head. We never hear what he's thinking. Because when someone is thinking, we use he and his. He wondered if his father, right? When we say he wondered. For a start, we're using John's name all the time. And I'm sure I've mentioned more than once that when you use someone's name, you cannot be inside their head because we never think of ourselves in terms of our name. We'll say, I thought, or I did this, right? I like, I dislike. And when that's translated into third person, we'd be saying he liked, he disliked. So there's that big tip-off that I've always that I've been plugging. When you see the name John here, it's absolutely certain that it's the narrator telling you about John. It can't be John talking. Now, I've sprinkled them everywhere, as you can see, just to make my point. And the other sure sign that this is a telly piece, a piece that tells rather than shows, is that I report, or the narrator reports on John's feelings and moods and reports when he's thinking. Look at all these. John was mystified. If this was written well, we would just show John being mystified. We'd hear his thoughts. What the heck is going on? What's my stupid father up to now? That's John being mystified when you show it. He started to wonder. He couldn't imagine. These are sure signs that we're telling a story about John. We're not watching and listening to John doing this imagining or wondering. And when you get big phrases like he considered the possibility that, you can drop that and just say, was his father being blackmailed? And then it's John's voice we hear. Similarly, as John packed a small overnight bag, he puzzled over the dilemma. Well, you can show John throwing things into his overnight bag, and as he's doing it, show his thoughts. No? This is so unlike my dad. I don't get this. Right? We can show him being puzzled rather than tell the reader he puzzled over the dilemma. There's a few on this page. We get one of his feelings. John was alarmed. Right? Far better to show alarm. Right? Let us see something like his hands shaking or his eyebrows going up or something that indicates alarm to you. Back to that word wondered again. In the cab, John wondered whether. And you can just dump all that and show him in the cab, looking anxiously at the traffic jam ahead, and you would show his thoughts. Will I get through security? They usually open bags, so you can show him thinking these things out. And we learn that he was naturally nervous. Well, it would be far better to show signs of that nervousness. And we learn that he was concerned that this would show. Again, you don't tell the reader that. You show them the signs of his concern. If there are physical signs, as I said, with nervousness, you can show physical signs. And if he was concerned that it would show, you could put that into thoughts. Let us hear him worrying about this issue. Okay? So there are two things to think about with show, don't tell. Look through your text and see if you've used the character's name. You always have to at the start to set it up, and then you move to he did this or she did that if it's a female character. So what else could we do? I'm not going to go into great detail with this, but let's have a look what else we could do. That large teal-coloured patch there, where he gets the phone call from his father. The phone call is being told to you. John's father sounded this. John's father said he should do this. He wouldn't reveal why. Now, the simple solution is use dialogue. Immediately you're showing. Dialogue is the best for showing anything because you're hearing the very words that were spoken. You don't have to be told what was said. Now, I won't try and construct a dialogue here. It's a good little job for you. If you'd like this text to play with and try and rewrite it so that it really works, email me. I'll send it to you and you can fiddle with it. Okay. The second bit in that murky brown colour, greeny brown, that one can't be dialogue because he's talking to anyone. He's talking to himself. And that's what you would show. This is where you use POV, point of view. We get inside John's head and we hear what it is he's wondering about. And so this is where he's musing. You might say, I can't imagine, he couldn't imagine Dad doing anything like that. Dad's never done an illegal thing in his life. He's a good guy. He helps the sick. He does all sorts of things. So we can show his thoughts, and that's what we're doing. Similarly, on this page, when the burly character turns up, it will not be a very big conversation, but you can at least have John answer the door. Let's actually hear the man say, "Are you John Slater?" Right? And we can hear John stammering, about what's going on, mate. What's the briefcase? And then we'd get the gruff, "I'm just a delivery man." So that would dress the whole story up immensely, because we're seeing it happen right before our eyes. Then that greeny colour down the bottom, again, it's all that wondering and thinking about stuff. Very simple to get into John's head and present that in third person with a strong POV, so we're hearing his thoughts. Okay. As I said, if you'd like this document, I'd be very happy to send it to you. Email me, and you can try doing something with it.
Okay, what are your takeaways from this one? Here's what I'd like you to remember. Number one, by all means, you can use a very storytelling style. If you wish, it's still in use. But if you would like your reader to really get deeply involved with particularly one character, then you need to develop a strong point of view for that character, a strong POV, which means getting inside the character's head and showing what life is like from inside the character's head. To move, it's very important then that you need to be able to move, if that's what you want to do, to move from a telling perspective across to showing. And I've pointed out a couple of ways that you can do this. For one thing, have a good look at what you've written, and if you see the characters' names splashed on every page, it's a very good clue that you are probably telling rather than showing. Because characters, when you're inside a character's head, when we're inside our own head, we don't call ourselves by name. The character doesn't say, John did this, John did that. The character will be saying in his own head or her head, I did this. This was done to me, using those particular pronouns. Now, because we're writing in third person, not first person, we have to change that. We will always say he or she, him or her, his or hers. We will use that set of pronouns because it's third person. But as I said, the amazing thing about reading is that you can use he, him, his, and your reader will hear, they will read that, but their brain will say, I, me, my. It's wonderful. So that's one thing you can do to make sure that you're showing, not telling. The other thing is your choice of verbs. Now, okay, many verbs are perfectly fine in a strong POV because they're action verbs like walked, jumped, ran. But watch carefully the verbs that deal with thought, because if you're saying he thought, he wondered, basically you're telling your reader that your character is thinking. If you're inside the character's head and you're listening to his or her thoughts, you don't have to be told that they're thinking. So it's a very good key to determine whether you're showing or telling, if this is a difficult concept for you. Now, I'm in the process of preparing a good list of all the variations of this sort of word that indicate that you are showing. And on the other side of the page, I'm going to show one possible way around saying he thought or he wondered or whatever. And I say one possibility because the way around this problem are as varied as there are writers. It's just a clue to how you might go about it. If you'd like that particular sheet checklist to see whether you've got these in your writing, email me and I'll send it to you. Email me at writing-course@hotmail.com. Okay, until next week, when I'll be comparing third-person omniscient with third-person multiple voice. It's goodbye from me, and keep safe.